Hello and welcome to another episode of the Deceptive Reality Podcast, an exciting second episode with your hosts, Nick, and the ever unsinkable Bert.
Hey, I know unsinkable, baby.
Second ones are
not
easier.
Like Titanic unsinkable, though.
No, the real kind.
Did you know? Actually, I've got two things to divulge in this thing. Firstly, did you know that the ship makers or the ship builders for the Titanic never proclaimed that it was unsinkable?
Oh, really? Was that like the PR guys, or did that never happen?
That never happened. That was a narrative after it hit the iceberg.
Interesting. Yeah.
But no one ever said that it was unsinkable.
It's weird how these like rumors and superstitions come about afterwards. And that can sometimes...
I always find that fascinating.
Yeah, that can sometimes explain the Mandela effect. I think we found out not too long ago.
That is true.
That one of them that we thought was something that never happened actually happened differently than people remember it. And that's where that came from. So this is sort of like the same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing. Second thing, I'm going to blow your mind. I'm going to see where you fall into this camp. And everyone in the comments section down below too. Before you watch this video, I need you to put this comment in because I need to know. When you have an idea, Nick, do you have an inner monologue that you talk to yourself?
Yeah, oftentimes if it's more complex, yeah.
Do you know, this weekend I read that 50 to 75% of people do not have an inner monologue.
I had heard that, but I didn't think it was that many. It kind of explains things though about people. Like sometimes you meet people and you think that there's nothing going on under the surface there.
Oh, here's what I find fascinating. Since I found that out last night, every person I've talked to has an inner monologue.
Yeah.
If the 50 to 70% was realistic, I would think I've already would have ran into one or two people. Though I did have one person that said, say what?
Oh, really? So they didn't then.
After I explained to them what it was, they didn't want to talk about it anymore.
I can't imagine how you'd function that way.
So my assumption is they do not. Me too. The vast majority of my decisions that I come up with is with my inner monologue.
Yeah, exactly. Or like...
I argue with it all the time. I'm like, you idiot.
Like on Dexter, the Dark Passenger. Or, and I know I brought this up, or I will bring this up in the future. On Mr. Robot, he talks to his friend, which is an inner monologue.
Yes.
So, yeah, I can't imagine functioning without that. That does blow my mind.
I couldn't either. Speaking of inner monologue, I bet you had some crazy inner monologues when we talked about this story.
Oh, sure did. This blew my mind. And I know I've said that a few times, but I'm always honest about that. This was nutty cuckoo crazy.
This is one of my favorite stories that I think I've told on here. I think that like most of our stories that we don't do a ton of stories like straight stories. Like we like going over mysteries. And we provide a story within certain realms. This one was told from point A to point B, back to back. Nick and I have obviously recorded. This is the second part. We've already recorded the second part.
Yeah. I don't know who needs to hear this, but apparently a lot of people, like you should listening to part 2 before you listen to part 1. It doesn't make sense.
We have.
Yeah, we got a lot of that.
I don't understand it. I really don't. I've never done that. But listen, hey, at the end of the day,
as long as you're listening,
each their own. Yeah, each their own. You just want to miss half the story. It'd be like, I'm going to go to the movies, but I'm not going to go in until it's halfway over. Like,
well, actually, I guess I do understand where they're coming from. I just read the last Harry Potter book. I didn't read any of the other ones. I just wanted to get the gist of it.
Well, on that note, good night, Nick. Well, obviously, it's been an entire week. Don't do like Nick did. Here's a preview of what happened last week.
It's something new.
Marcum reaches into his pocket and finds a few sheet metal screws left over from building his contraption.
I wonder what would happen if I threw this at it.
With a mixture of curiosity and caution, Marcum threw a sheet metal screw straight at the distortion. The screw disappears in midair.
Ooh, that kind of scared me when he threw that thing in there. I wasn't expecting that noise.
Nick's like, oh man, be careful. Be careful, madman.
Be careful. I was really into it though, because it's like the starting of all those 80s adventure sci-fi movies. Like,
yes,
I can picture that. It's the middle of the night. You can hear the crickets out there, and all of a sudden he's come across something he's patched together from a bunch of things. And then the scary noise.
The scary noise, Nick.
That's where he and I would differ. I want to repeat this one. I still got things to throw in there, like mice. Like I throw a mouse in there. I'd poke a stick in there. Like all this kind of stuff.
This electricity, it'll kill you instantly, Nick.
Well, not this screw disappearing machine part. Like that just makes things disappear and reappear.
But he's thrown it into the electrode, the thing above the electrode. What happens if it hits the electrode? Which is what he initially thought happened.
There must be sacrifices for science.
Well, he's determined that he wants to build a bigger one.
Okay.
Do you want to hear how he comes up with this concept?
Yeah, for sure.
We have to know where he's going with this. We kind of know where he's at.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see
like
where
I said,
he's
I'm
going.
already showing up. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's see if you're willing to show up for this next one, Nick.
Okay.
The next step was obvious to Marcum. His 18-inch Jacob ladder was good, but an 8-foot-tall Jacob ladder, much better. Scaling up was a formidable challenge, yet not insurmountable in Marcum's eyes. The physical components could be enlarged. Bigger conductors and more powerful lasers were within reach. The true hurdle lay in the power required to breathe life into this behemoth. The leap from 120 volts to 20,000 had strained his resources to their limits, and the homemade transformer that facilitated this feat was a casualty of its own success, burning out after a brief taste of what was possible. The ambitions for his time machine necessitated a power source capable of sustaining 50,000 volts or more, a demand far beyond the capabilities of ordinary equipment.
Like, this is super villain stuff almost, or I don't know, like crazy doctor.
I love this guy.
He's interesting. And he's decided it's a time machine at this stage, I guess.
You know, we talk about putting our personality in this.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell in this section, I put it at the beginning because though I was thinking Tim Allen, I was thinking if Tim Allen was to write the segment, 18-inch, good. 8 foot, better.
Now, I'm going to change my answer. Let's do this episode as if we're like this guy's buddies and he's inviting us over for this. At this stage, I'm like, have you turned this on before? Is this the first time you're turning this on? Like, I'd come around for the second time, I think, not the first.
Well, let's put it this way. He's only came up with the concept.
Right. We're sort of playing Battleship with this. We're hitting near the Philadelphia experiment, but we're not covering it yet.
Yes. That's exactly what we're doing. But we're going to have to cover it here soon. This will be the second time we've talked about the Philadelphia project back to back. So we're going to have to cover that at some point. But I think what makes this one so interesting to me is this is just a regular guy that's like, man, I want to build this Jacob's ladder. I don't want a little small one like I typically see. I want one that's at least 1.5 feet tall. I'm going to make this thing. He looks at it, he goes, not enough voltage. I'm smart enough to know how to increase the voltage. Then he makes it, and then he starts playing with things, and then he accidentally falls into a discovery, which all science, technically, there's a good probability that they ran into it by mistake. What if I told you that somebody called in that could validify the story a little bit.
Well, now that would be interesting.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to see who that caller is?
I sure would. That's fascinating.
Amid the flurry of support and curiosity following Michael Marcum's interview with Art Bell, a particularly notable moment was when an officer involved in Marcum's arrest called into the show.
You're on the air with Michael Marcum. Hi.
Hi, this is Stanbury, Missouri.
Are you
Arresting officer?
Oh, you are the.
Tom Hampton.
Hi, Mike. How you doing, boy?
Hey, you still got my diary, don't you?
You bet. Sit here on the desk.
You are the arresting officer.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll be darned.
Wow.
It's
great to meet you. I don't know if it's great for Michael. Are you guys friends?
Well, are we friends, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of.
Well, listen, maybe, officer, you can give us all of this from your perspective. What did you find when you arrived at Michael's house?
Well, we knocked on the door. There was 8 of us in the search team.
8 of you?
Yes.
You got a search warrant.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, because you suspected something was going on. What was the basis of the warrant? What did you think was going on there?
We had received information that Michael had these transformers in his residence, and that they had been stolen. I did hear your earlier part of your broadcast where he brand out the majority of town, which was not right. It was just a small section, approximately 2 blocks.
This call added a layer of credibility to Marcum's story, bridging the gap between the realms of unconventional scientific exploration and the enforcement of law and order. The officer's call was not just a recounting of the legal implications of Marcum's endeavors, but an unexpected endorsement of the spirit behind his work. The officer's participation in the discussion underscored a nuanced perspective on Marcum's project. While the legal system had to address the theft of equipment and unauthorized use of power, there was an underlying recognition of the innovative spirit driving Marcum. This was a rare instance where the enforcers of the law openly acknowledged the potential value of what Marcum was attempting, even as they carried out their duties. The officer's sentiments, suggesting even a reluctant admiration for Marcum's ambition, resonated with listeners. It hinted at a broader desire to see such innovative pursuits continue, albeit within the bounds of legality and safety.
I could not have predicted that. That was fantastic. I love that. I love that. I don't think I've ever heard a better endorsement that could lend credibility to something. Like,
we can confirm one thing for sure. He was arrested.
Yes. And there was some weird stuff there.
My favorite part, as soon as he gets on the phone, what is it that Marcum's most concerned about? His friggin' notebook. Do you still have my notebook? Yeah, boy, sitting on my
do you
desk,
have my
boy.
diary or whatever? You should give that back.
I need that back so I can build another time machine.
I like the guy's exit too. He's like, because he's like, boy, that was totally king of the hill there.
Facts. Yeah, I love that part so much because there was a few different things that was a takeaway, and obviously, as much as I would love, I think the police segment was like 15, 20 minutes. Like he was on the phone for a while.
Yeah, and can't air all that here.
No. But I wanted to, the way you're hearing it, I spliced things together. So it sounds like it was all said in one segment, but that was probably over like 10 minutes.
Oh, really? That was really smooth.
Man, this is what I do, man. We're a professional podcast company. What you talking about?
Professional. You're the Mad Max or Mad Mike of podcasting here.
Every single
making
segment
science look easy.
Every single one you've heard from Art Bell has all been spliced together. These are from different segments.
Nice. Seamless, man. Seamless.
I try. We trying over here. But the police officer, Art was like, do you think he should keep doing this? And he goes, this is very dangerous. Like, I don't think anyone should be doing this. That said, I can understand the value of what he's doing. So he didn't openly say, yeah, he should be doing this.
Yeah.
But
well, he'd get in a lot of trouble for that. Correct.
But he saw the value And I think that's a big deal. Like if you're an arresting officer,
Yeah.
if it's some wackadoodle that's not really doing anything,
Right.
I don't know that
You're
would
not going
say
to
that.
call in and endorse him, really.
I wouldn't assume so.
Right.
So I think
Like some guy you arrest gets on a radio show and he's talking about how he was abducted by aliens, but you really know that he was just tripping on drugs or something.
right.
You're not going to call in and say, yeah, man, he was probably abducted by aliens.
right. Exactly.
You know?
That's my thing. There's something to that, which makes me wonder, and this is not said anywhere. This is me speculating, guessing.
Right. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Once again.
I'm curious if he saw something. Like maybe all these cops came in and he's like, what do you got here? And Marcum was like, let me show you.
See, that's what I was thinking earlier. Clearly, in my mind, he would have shown them.
I mean, I don't know. Like it's such a different period of time too, right? Like there's
Right.
some things that they'd let him do and there's some things they wouldn't let him do. Like, I don't know.
Well, if I'm the officer, I come in there and I see this guy has not sold these Transformers. He's hooked them up to something. I'd at least be like, what are you doing?
Oh, for sure.
You know,
I would have asked 100%.
What the heck are you doing? Like,
'Cause that would have went
and
my
if he
notes
didn't
also.
turn it on, maybe I'd turn it on just to see what happens.
He'd have killed himself, probably.
Probably.
Shoot,
But
imagine all
that
these
would have been
laser
me.
beams. That'd been the laser beams shooting all over the place. Would have looked like a Madonna concert up in there with all the pyrotechnics and.
That's true. But I figure you don't put the on switch in a place where you get killed pressing the on switch.
If I'm being
You
a
know?
buck here, I bet there is no on switch. He's probably just plugging two cables together
Oh, it
to an
could
extension
be.
cord. Because
You know what? I know these guys. They always got to set up some kind of cool switch.
maybe so. I don't know. I wish they had a diagram or the notebook or something to where I could see.
Well, here's another thing. Guy wouldn't have kept his notebook if he didn't see something, think something was going on.
That's true.
You know, he wouldn't have said, I think what he's doing it. Excuse me. He wouldn't say, I think what he's doing has value if he never saw anything.
True.
Would he even call into this show if he didn't see something? I don't think so.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that call in, because here's the other thing. People can be like, okay, they clearly faked that. That
Right.
did
Is
not
he even
sound
the
fake
cop?
at
Is he
all.
this guy's buddy or whatever?
Right. But just the way it was set up, the awkwardness in Michael's voice. After he found out about his notebook, he wanted to know that up front.
Yeah.
You still have my notebook?
Yeah.
And then once he said yes, later on, the cops were like, I don't know, Michael, are we friends? And Michael's like,
Yeah.
well,
I guess.
I guess. You know, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It just has all the feelings to me of being valid.
Oh man, it could go either way. I feel like that lends it a lot of credibility. But then again, I couldn't have planned that better unless I wrote something like that.
You're right.
So,
Here's
but
the
you know
thing,
what?
though.
These things happen.
When you listen to the full interview, though, like the cops
Right.
went into all the legalese, all the
Yeah.
legal territory, everything. Like, obviously, I couldn't put that all here, but like when you listen to it, you go, that was a police officer that arrested this guy. That's who
Right.
that was.
Sometimes you can tell, but
Yeah.
you know what? I'm not outside the realm of thinking that this could be faked, but
sure.
taking it at face value, that's really cool.
It's really cool.
Makes a good story, huh?
Makes a great story. This is why this is such a good story. And again,
Yeah.
I would have never known about this story had we not done the Halloween episode in which you told me I want to do it like Art Bell. I would have never known about any of this.
Well, let me shout out to my good friend Les, who was always talking crazy conspiracies and stuff and introduced me to Art Bell, which I am very thankful for. He would be an interesting cat to get on to talk about conspiracy theories. He knows so much about this, so much about it.
He's a conspiracy guy.
He's a conspiracy nut in the best possible way if you're listening.
We call them the fanatics, Nick, not nuts.
Oh,
fanatics.
Yeah. No, he's got some he's got some wild theories, and like every once in a while I was like, no, that's not true, and I can tell you why that's not true. But
listen, what's his name?
Anyway, Les.
Listen, Les. He said the same thing about the moon also.
Yeah.
You can bring him to the middle of the field. You just got to show some proof.
Yeah, you got to bring some compelling evidence, not just theories.
Yeah, I thought that little bit of validity of that call-in cop added for me so much to the story, because this guy was there. And the fact that he's like, I don't think that he should do this, but I understand why.
Yeah.
Really kind of for me is like, you know what? He clearly knows something that the rest of the public doesn't know. Like one of the things that made it so obvious to me that the cop was probably the cop, he corrected what was on that interview. Yeah. Because he was like, I listened to your earlier part of the broadcast and you said that it shut down the entire town, browned out the entire town. It did not. Let me correct that. It did about, I think he said like a block and a half.
Or I thought he said 2 blocks, but anyway.
2 blocks could be.
I mean, as far as the guy who did it knows, he probably can't tell much further than that. He probably thought it was the whole town.
Right. So it's kind of like, okay, from Michael Marcum's point of view, he shut down the entire town, which is where the narrative came from.
Yeah.
The officer was like, no, I took reports from around town and this is what really happened. It just adds validity to the story and to the fact that that's probably a police officer, because to tell a great story, you want to shut down the entire town, not 2 blocks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a detail that someone might not think to throw in there if they were just pulling something out of whole cloth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that. That knocked my socks off. Because I was trying to think, oh, it's one of his friends. It's it's the neighbor or something like that. Never thought it would be one of the cops.
The actual cop, which I think is cool because by like today's standards, that would never happen.
I don't know. Like I've talked to some, they can be pretty cool, but they'd be really worried about getting in trouble.
That's thing. They would not want to call into a national syndicate television show, or I guess radio show.
Yeah. And that was definitely played everywhere. So that was risky for that guy. Unless he's like retired or something. He don't care.
He wouldn't have been retired at that point. He was not out of jail very long. Like he was the arresting officer.
Oh yeah. It was only 60 days later, right?
Probably closer to 90, because he probably got out. Art Bell looked for him for 30 days and then the radio. So 90 days after he was arrested, unless he was he didn't sound that old on the phone.
He's just like Danny Glover. This is my last 3 days before retire.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
Getting too old for this.
It's nuts. It definitely added a lot to that for me, though. When I look at the validity of a story, whenever we come up with podcasts, the first thing I think is, what's the story? Do I care about the story? And my assumption is if I don't care about the story, no one else is going to care about it, because I'm not going to be able to tell it in a way that makes it worthwhile for anyone else. If I like the story, then I go, who's the protagonist?
Yeah.
Do I care about the protagonist? And if I don't care about the protagonist, again, doesn't matter how great the story is, I'm not going to be able to tell that story correctly.
Right.
In this case, I loved Michael Marcum from the first time I heard his voice.
He really does seem down to earth, but he's got that, you know, he's intelligent, but he doesn't have to tell you that he is. Like, I like that. He just seemed down to earth. All he cares about is making this freaking time machine. He could care less about anything else. He just wants to make progressively larger Jacob's ladders. He doesn't even care about this other stuff. He just wants to make one that you can see from anywhere in the world.
From the moon that's fake. He wants to look down and see his Jacob's ladder.
He wants to steal power from the fake moon.
Exactly. So they go through this entire process and they pick it all up. They get it all squared up. Another thing that was in this radio show, of course, they had a bunch of call-in people, but for Michael, the one thing that, and Art's trying to kind of lead him along this direction. He was like, what can we do to maybe get you going in the right direction? And people start calling in and be like, dude, I've got transformers, or dude, I have a warehouse, or dude, I have this, I have that. Have you ever thought of this? Have you ever thought of that? And this syndication of a show, I mean, it was huge. This was a huge show. This
is almost like the precursor to GoFundMe. Like everyone's pitching in a little to get this guy going. Correct. I like that.
Now, I want to inch us forward just a little bit so you kind of understand what happens next. Are you ready for that?
Oh, I'm so ready.
When Michael Marcum appeared on Art Bell's show, his demeanor was notably humble. His journey into the realm of experimental science wasn't fueled by a desire for fame or attention. Rather, it was driven by pure curiosity and a passion for exploration. It was Art Bell who sought out Marcum, intrigued by the whispers of his experiments that echoed through the fringes of scientific communities. Bell convinced Marcum to share his story on the air, a decision that would catapult Marcum from relative obscurity into the spotlight of public fascination. The night of the interview, millions tuned in, captivated by the tale of a man who dared to dream beyond the confines of conventional physics. Marcum's story resonated with a wide audience, sparking a wave of support that was as unexpected as it was overwhelming. Listeners were moved by his humility and his audacious pursuit of knowledge, leading to an outpouring of offers and assistance. Transformers, crucial to scaling up his experiments, were offered by those who had access to such equipment, recognizing the potential impact of Marcum's work. Property owners came forward, proposing spaces where Marcum could conduct his experiments without the constraints of residential surroundings. Perhaps most significantly, financial contributions began to flow, from small donations to substantial support, all aimed at funding the construction of a new, larger machine.
Michael, we're out of time. It has been a great pleasure. And yes, we do very unusual, kooky things on the show every now and then. But Michael, on the serious side, I admire you on a lot of levels. I really do. Not the stealing of the Transformers, but what you're doing and what you're trying to do. And I really appreciate your coming on the program.
I like how he was like, not the stealing of the Transformers, but I really
we can't
admire
doing that,
you.
Michael.
Yeah, we can't encourage that. But now he's going to get funded, it sounds like.
Yes. So what makes this so interesting, and this is where I think the story really starts to take shape. So we're obviously on part 2 of the podcast.
Right.
This is the second part. The first part was going to be about, we're going to guesstimate about an hour and a half, hour and 40-ish minutes. At about an hour and 50 minutes in, we figured out the most important part. It's not the phone call. It's not the things he did before, but now people are like, we want to see this happen.
Right.
So as the show was going on, Art's like, if we was to do this on scale, what would we need to do? Like, how does people get in contact? He gave his phone number on the air live.
Oh, wow. That's pretty serious.
Which he later said was a huge mistake because he was getting phone calls nonstop. So he got funding. He got Transformers. He got a building. Now, what he did, because again, all he cared about was building a freaking time machine. That was where his goals were. So
let me stop you just for a second.
Yep.
You in the narration keeps saying time machine. At this point, is he like, I'm building a time machine? Is that what he has concluded it was?
He's leaning more towards that, but in his opinion, it could really be one of two things: a time machine or a portal.
Right.
And he's even at this point, because of this radio show, now he's talking to physicists and other intelligent people. And he's getting input from them, like, what's this vortex? What created this? Why is this happening? And they're filling in some of the gaps that he might not quite know.
Oh, yeah, because they gave him that term vortex. I remember now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting. I'd be curious to know what they thought was going on.
Well, and I think that's why all this stuff was happening. Now that he's been on this interview, he has all the components that he needs. Now he has to start building on an even bigger scale what he did the first time. But just as importantly, now the people that's funded him, gave him the stuff, and has a warehouse, they're all witnesses to what's occurring.
Right.
Or at least what they think is going to occur. So what he told them is, I'm going to take all these notes and I'm going to do all these things, and you guys can stop by at any point in time and see exactly what I'm doing. Just let me build this machine. Yeah. Just let me build this machine. That's all I want to do. You guys can see it. We can experiment. We can throw stuff in like we did the first time. Maybe you can help me identify what it's doing, but you guys can see. I only want you guys to see.
How long ago was this? I forget now. Like roughly.
When did it happen?
Exact. Yeah.
1995, I believe.
Trying to think back now. It's a long time ago. If it was more modern, I'd love him to set up like cameras you can watch all the time on the internet.
It wasn't
Wouldn't that
quite
be something?
This would have been the time of the big shoulder camcorders. So we wasn't even at handheld at that point. I remember I bought my first handheld camcorder for me at a level that I can afford. Now you got to understand, Michael did not have a ton of money. This not like this guy was rich. You know, he couldn't buy a transformer, $15,000, $20,000.
Right.
You know, he acquired for Michael around here. We say that's acquired. But he acquired his first set of transformers from that yard. But long story short, this was happening. I think this interview happened in 1995.
Right.
So he's building this, but more importantly, Art Bell behind the scenes is also following up with Michael. And he's like, hey, what's happening? What's the transition? What's going on with this? What's going on with that? And he doesn't bring Michael back on. He's just kind of trying to figure out exactly what is happening. And he's listening in the background. Art Bell was real good about that. He's waiting for the next story to take place.
Yeah. He doesn't want a step-by-step update. He wants, this is the next part of the narrative, kind of like what we're doing in this.
Exactly. It's like I call it giving you little bits and pieces. We're gonna dissect it a little bit, and then we're gonna come back to it when it's time. And for Art Bell, it's not time yet.
Yeah. But
so he gets this warehouse, and I'm gonna forward us ahead a little bit.
Okay.
He starts building the machine.
Right.
So the donor of the warehouse, the way it worked out, it's not like the guy gave him a warehouse. He was like, hey, I'm going to let you use this warehouse for X amount of time.
Yeah.
And because, again, this guy doesn't know who Michael Marcum is. He has no clue.
He's not just going to give it to him. It's not like, here's the deed.
Correct.
Good luck.
I'm going to give you X amount of time.
Right.
Now, my understanding is basically what Michael was doing was, after he hit that time frame, the people would come together and he would say, hey, I kind of have this thing a little operational now. Let me show you kind of what it's doing. And the assumption that I'm getting, he's throwing stuff in and people seeing it. They're like, oh yeah, that's weird. It's just disappearing. Where's it going?
So that sort of extended his time, I assume.
Yeah, because the guy at the warehouse is like, okay, we're on to something. Let's extend this out a little bit more.
Right. It's like benchmarking.
Yes, correct. So they're kind of building on this entire thing, and they're trying to figure out, okay, we now have this grand scale Jacob's ladder, which I find this fascinating because if you think about it, if I'm thinking about it, right, this story is now national.
Yeah.
Why has the government not stepped in yet?
Oh, they've had their grubby mitts around this at one point or another.
But think about it. If the Philadelphia Project's true, this is basically in the same realm. Why would they not?
I can tell you what they've already done.
Okay.
When he got arrested, they sent the guys there. His sentence was only 60 days for a felony. Surprising. His probation means he's got to report in and check with them for how many years was it?
5.
5 years. This is all happening in that space. He checks in with them. The people have kept his notes and stuff like that. They've monitored him, probably put someone in jail with him. All this stuff. I don't think that you can have a felony because it's theft over, was it $5,000 or $7,000? What is it?
Well,
the
back
rule for
then,
that?
I'm not sure what it was. It wasn't $15,000. I can assure you that.
Right, and that's just one of them.
I'm going to assume in the 90s, maybe $1,000, probably, because that would have been a large sum of money in the 90s.
I'm going to lay out a real conspiracy for you here.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready to hear this.
They want him to continue this. They had to make a show with the cops to get him out of the residential area, get him into a place that's safer for the public. He's out of jail in 60 days, just had enough time to think about it, refine his thought process. He's reporting to them weekly, monthly for 5 years. They're checking in on him. They've got to visit him. They're allowed to visit, that's surprise visits anytime they want. Some of the donations, maybe even the warehouse owner himself or the people donating the transformers. This all could be part of a plan to get him working on it, but get him away from people.
That is true.
That's my conspiracy theory right now.
That is true. That's a good theory. I like it.
Maybe I did learn a thing or two from Les.
Maybe so. Listen, hey, it's possible.
Next time I see him, I'm going to have to thank him in person.
He's got you in that realm now, Nick. That's all he needs, just to get you in that realm.
Yeah. I'm converting, I guess. No, I'm still skeptical, but I'm into this story.
Well, this story is a good story. Because here's the thing. We didn't really know if it was true or not. Then we get the police officer and we go, some validity there.
Yeah.
Now all these people's giving him stuff and they're there watching him create this machine.
Let me ask you one more thing before we go on.
Yeah.
For a crime of this size, not violent, just a couple of folks, you ever known him to send 8 cops to a guy's house?
No.
I don't think these guys are well known as violent criminals. That struck me as odd too.
There is 2 things that I forgot to bring up from earlier in the podcast. One of them I think is funny.
Okay.
But after our debacle, when our system shut down in the middle of the narration, of course, no one out there in podcast land is going to know because it'll be edited out.
Well, till now.
I just told you.
You ratted us out.
That's why I forgot this. When Marcum went to the door and the cops were there, when he came back, his couch was gone.
What? Was it in the vortex? Did they feed it in the vortex?
I don't know.
Dang it, guys.
He says he doesn't know where it went, but it wasn't in the room.
None of them probably admit to it either.
No. The second part that I forgot to mention is that all of his buddies, they also went to jail.
I've gathered that. Yeah.
Apparently, when he was talking on Art Bell, and he's like, yeah, my friends aren't real happy with me right now. And Art's like, oh, yeah. And he goes, yeah, they've all been to trial at this point. That's what happens when you go bringing your truck around.
I'd wonder if they got harsher sentences than him.
I don't know. I'd be super curious to find that out. Unfortunately, it's not in podcast land.
If I did find that out, that they all got harsher sentences than him, I'd be like, conspiracy confirmed. I cannot be convinced otherwise.
Yeah, because that would be weird. Why would the guy that masterminded the entire thing get less time than everyone else? That wouldn't make sense. Exactly.
And he's got other crimes. Recipient of stolen goods. What Well, I can't think of other ones, but still, like the felony we talked about.
I'm sure there's a laundry list of things.
Like, was it misappropriate use of power or something like that? Or
I'm sure there's so many things we're not even delving into the realm of.
Exactly.
So there's a lot to this right off the get-go.
Yeah.
But the impressive thing is he got it back up and running again.
Mm-hmm.
But a different version, not the same one, obviously.
Right.
This time using different components, a lot more power.
Mm-hmm.
He's tweaked a few things. He had some time to think about it when he was in jail the first time.
Yeah. First time.
Another thing the officer had mentioned, because on the interview, they said, he said, yeah, I don't really think the neighborhood wants me around anymore, blah, 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 blah. And they asked the cop, and the cop's like, I've not really heard that. But, I think it would be fine. But while they're sitting there and they're talking and Michael's kind of going through everything, the cop was correcting some of the things that he was saying.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me along the lines of there's something there. But now we're seeing it firsthand because the people that's funding this bad boy,
right,
they're seeing firsthand what's happening.
So they are seeing the effects of this vortex, these people who chipped in, right?
Yes.
Nice. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because even Art Bell, he's having this conversation. Okay, what's going on with this? Well, they extended my time at this warehouse because of X, Y, and Z.
Did Art Bell ever go out there?
Art Bell was planning to go out there.
Oh, no. Uh-oh. That does not bode well.
Do you want to hear what happens next?
I sure do. I don't know if it's going to be what we just talked about, but I really want to hear what's next. Yeah.
In the second interview between Art Bell and Michael "Madman" Marcum on Art Bell's radio show, they revisited Marcum's ambitious project some 16 months after their first conversation. This episode served as an update on Marcum's progress, his legal encounters, and his plans moving forward with his time machine project. Marcum, having faced legal repercussions for his earlier experiments, including jail time and probation, remained undeterred in his quest to explore the boundaries of time travel. Despite the obstacles, the period following his first interview saw a significant outpouring of support from the public, with offers of equipment, resources, and even properties to aid in his endeavors. This collective backing underscored the public's fascination with Marcum's vision and his relentless pursuit of scientific exploration. During the interview, Marcum detailed the enhancements made to his time machine, including the integration of rotating magnets to achieve greater control over the machine's operation. This technical advancement was a testament to Marcum's ongoing collaboration with physicists and his capacity to refine his concepts based on scientific feedback. Art Bell's involvement went beyond mere curiosity. He offered to document Marcum's experiment, recognizing the historical significance of successful time travel, or alternately, the potential risks involved. Bell's willingness to videotape Marcum's human trial phase underscored the gravity of the experiment and its potential implications for science and humanity. Marcum's readiness to potentially enter the time machine himself highlighted the personal stakes of his project.
Well, that took a sudden turn that I think is going to have somewhat predictable results.
You think so?
Well, I mean, let's put together the evidence or the hints that you've given me. Art Bell was going to visit him. Exhibit A. Exhibit B. The madman thinks it's time to step into the vortex.
Well, in the second interview is 16 months after the first interview.
Right.
And one of the questions that came up in the second interview is, how far along are we? And that's when, kind of like what was covered in the narration, he broke down all the things that he had corrected in his mind,
right,
to make this thing more stable. Because he wanted to make sure that it was a lot more stable. But one thing was answered that they had not figured out until the second interview in the 16 months. what was happening was he was throwing stuff in and it was disappearing.
Right. Right.
He found out where they were going.
Oh, he did find that out.
He figured it out. What he found was instead of 2 to 5 seconds, it was coming back 2 minutes later.
Oh, okay. All right. That's not a huge difference then.
And it was going between 50 and 150 yards.
So it was moving as well.
On the north and the south direction only.
Really?
So depending on how much power he put in would determine how far out it would go.
Right. Did that also determine the length of time it was gone?
Supposedly, yes.
Interesting. And
So
that's a lot of power just to get like a couple minutes.
Yes. So what he determined was, out of curiosity, he was like, man, I've been throwing bolts in there. He started throwing baseball bats in there.
Right.
Like he kept stepping it up. You know, at one point in time, it was pieces of metal and baseball bats. And then he's like, you know what? Probably not ethical by today's standards. I'm going to throw some guinea pigs in there, see what happens.
See, that's the next thing I was going to ask about.
Yep. So he started throwing animals in, guinea pigs and stuff like that. And then, lo and behold, he would find them. They were completely fine. Nothing was wrong with them. You know, nothing, like he said, it's not like I can talk to them and they can be like, hey, bro, dude, that sucked.
Yeah.
He was like, but when we would find them, because it's not like we knew exactly where they were going to end up.
Right.
We knew roughly where they were going to be. And sometimes it would take us a while to figure out exactly where they would end up at.
Yeah.
But when we found out, they seemed unharmed. There was nothing that we could observe, and they still lived just fine.
Huh. All right. Well, I'm a little more confident in his chances of survival now, although I'm sure at some point this is not going to work out for him.
I mean, we haven't made it that part of the story yet to see.
Well,
but right now, everything looks fine.
Yeah.
Now, there was rumors that when that couch went through, there was a cat on the couch and the cat disappeared, but he said that was false. He said that wasn't real.
Well, that's good.
He said, I don't even know where that came from. That didn't even make sense. But then later he admitted to throwing some animals in to see what happened. So he did that. And on the Art Bell show, when he was on the phone, people was like, listen, you've tested this on animals. I am willing to go into this machine and see what happens.
So just callers were saying that.
Just callers. It was like, I will do this. Some of them were interested in time travel. They wanted to see what happened. And he said, I am scared to do that because if something was to happen, I could potentially be tried for murder.
100% he would be. There's no potential
about that. But if I do it to myself, I made that choice.
Right.
So I think what his thought process is we really do need to know what's happening. The only way we're really going to know is someone's got to go through this thing or they got to figure out what's happening. So on the radio show, he said, maybe, I would be willing to see what happens. If anyone goes through, it's me.
Right.
Because I don't want to be held accountable for anyone else.
Yeah. Like there's no question if someone went through and something happened to him, or even if they just went missing, he's going back to jail. He's on probation.
Right.
Like I'm surprised. I think that's another testimony to the government having their hand in that, because you can't continue doing the thing you went to jail for while you're on probation.
Right.
That's odd. That is odd.
Yes.
On a related note, do you remember season 3 of Stranger Things? That machine they had that teleported Hopper to Russia?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's lifted from this too, just like our other story.
Very well could be.
Seems that way.
Now, it's only fair that I tell you what happens next.
Okay.
Second interview goes by. He talks about, hey, I'm going to probably have to jump into this thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
They
hold
never,
on. Wasn't there 3 interviews?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
But they never hear from him again
Well, crap.
until 18 years later.
What? I just about ready to flip this table over. Are you serious? Are you being serious with me right now?
18 years later, Art Bell tries to find him,
Right.
cannot locate him. He talks to everyone that's involved in everything.
They don't know
Michael's
where he
gone.
is. None of them know.
They have no one has a clue where he went. Some people thought he skipped out of town. He couldn't produce what he said he was producing.
Right.
Other people thought maybe the government took him.
Yeah.
Some people assumed that maybe he did jump into the machine. No one really knew what happened to Michael Marcum until one day in a very secret location, a gentleman that seemed to be Michael Marcum called in to Art Bell, and then Art Bell said, "Don't move. I'm going to send people to you, and we're going to put you in a confidential secret location."
Right.
And then they talked for another 2.5 hours about where he's been for the last 18 years.
What is our level of certainty this is the guy? Like, how certain was Art Bell?
I know the answer to this.
You gonna make me wait?
Do you want to hear what happens next?
Yeah. Just like this is the second time my mind's been blown out the back of my head.
Now you remember, this is 18 years later.
Right. If it's the same guy, what a unreasonable amount of effort to go to for a hoax. Unreasonable. Like, I can't tell a joke and then give you the punchline 18 years later.
Here's the thing. I didn't add the actual narration from the show on this one.
Okay.
It's 100% the same guy. Same wording mannerisms, same voice, same concepts, same ideas, same everything.
Son of a gun. All right. Lay it on me.
But this is going to explain in bits and pieces what happened.
I'm going to have a heart attack. You're a freaking heart attack.
Nearly 2 decades had passed since Marcum's voice last graced the airwaves of Bell's show. In that time, Marcum became a figure shrouded in mystery, his whereabouts and fate the subject of speculation among Bell's audience. Despite Bell's efforts, Marcum had seemingly vanished, leaving behind a legacy of curiosity and a trail of unanswered questions. Then, in an extraordinary twist, Marcum reappeared, ready to share the incredible journey he had embarked upon. The anticipation built as Marcum recounted the critical moments leading up to his audacious decision to test his time machine on the most unpredictable subject, himself. Marcum was poised to leap into the unknown, to step into the vortex of his own creation. What was on the other side, he wondered. Michael knew that if he told anyone that he was going to leap into what he believed was a time machine, he would be stopped. Either the police would come and put a stop to it, possibly the government. Family, friends that thought that he had taken it too far. Marcum had to do this secretly. Michael finishes up his day, and he is the only one in the warehouse. He places a camcorder at the end of the warehouse, and then sets up a ladder and begins climbing it rung by rung. He looks deep into the vortex, takes a deep breath, and jumps before he can talk himself out of it.
Oh, well, where was the tape? Where was the tape?
This is why I stopped it here. We're going to talk about each part of this because I don't want anything to get missed because there's a lot to this.
You're killing
there's a lot
me,
to
Bert.
this end part.
You were killing
A lot
me.
to it.
Oh my goodness. All right.
Let this sink in.
Yep.
In his mind, he goes, there's just enough people that if I say I'm going to do this, there's about 100% chance somebody is going to stop me.
Oh, yeah. My family wouldn't let me jump into an electric thing that makes things disappear.
No.
No.
Even if you know where it lands. Now, remember, the story is also taking place 18 years later.
Right. So something had to happen in between there.
I mean, 18 years went by. 18 total years. So he sets up his camcorder and he hits record because he's like, no one's here. If things go bad, I want people to understand where I went.
Right.
That was his idea.
That's what I want to.
Now, for him to be safe, because you got to remember, there's a lot of power. This is all electromagnetism, high voltage. We're talking voltage at levels that would kill you 1,000 times over.
Right.
He can't touch the ground because if he does, that's where he grounds out and he dies. So he's got to climb a ladder, jump from the ladder into the vortex.
Okay.
That's where we left this segment.
Right.
So
right.
We have a warehouse. No one's there. We know there's a camcorder recording.
Right.
And we know he's made the jump.
Right. Which, keep in mind as well, there's no one there to turn off the machine or the camcorder.
No.
Okay.
So think about this. They come in the next day.
Right.
Where's Michael? Why is the machine still on? Why is the camcorder in the corner? At this point in time, it wouldn't be recording. It would have turned off.
It's stopped by then, yeah.
But why is it set up on this tripod at the end of the warehouse? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, that's weird.
Right.
You don't think anyone turned that camcorder on to see what happened?
That's what I'm saying. What is on the video?
That's a great question.
That you will
Michael,
answer?
Maybe we will, maybe we won't.
Oh,
you got to understand, this is 18 years later. We're talking about this.
Right.
Like, this happened. This third interview is 18 years after the last interview.
Right.
18. Art Bell thought Michael Marcum died.
Yeah.
He thought he fried himself. No one wanted to admit to it.
Yeah.
He was gone.
A logical conclusion, I think.
And he moved forward. Because even when they were doing the first series of interviews, he's like, I will tell you that everyone that has done this has died that I know. And I've talked to a lot of people that's done this kind of thing. Not a single one of them is alive.
Right.
At some point, if you continue this, and I would love to see you continue this because I want to know what happens. I don't want to see you fry like a French fry. Exactly what Art Bell said. So Art Bell for 18 years is like, this guy killed himself.
He's gone.
Just no one wants to admit it. They don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
It's an embarrassment probably to him and his family. And his family doesn't want to know. I'm not going to push the envelope. I'm going to let it go.
Right.
Out of nowhere, 18 years later, they get information that Madman is on the phone and wants to talk to Art Bell. How crazy would that be?
That is crazy. I'd be like, what? There's no way. There's no way.
Correct. The first thing I would have thought, this is not the same guy.
This is some guy who just heard the previous episode, wants to pull one over on me now.
For anyone that does not know, or I tell you what, I've made a friend today that I believe he's like a curator of Art Bell media stuff. I'll see if he has all of these interviews and see if I can tag them inside of our YouTube channel.
Oh, I
so
love
everyone
that.
can then, go into it. And I've made a few Art Bell friends today. So
nice.
I'll see if he has these interviews. I've got my own interviews that I listen to from the ones I've searched up, but I'll see if he has them. If he has them, I'll tag him inside the description so y'all can hear it. The third one's clearly, it's the same guy.
Yeah.
100% the same guy.
Okay.
So we talked about what's happened up to this point. He's jumped.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, he's gone to land on the other side. Do you want to hear what happens when he lands on the other side?
I do,
Now, my
because I just
question
can't connect the dots here. I can't like my mind is going in so many different directions. I can't connect these things.
Before I hit the play button, if you was a guessing man,
Mm-hmm.
remember what he was doing before with the power he's using and everything else.
Yeah.
Things were landing between 50 and 150 yards away,
Right.
and they were going out 2 minutes.
Right.
How far into the future do you think he went? And how far away do you think he would have went?
Years and miles. And miles
Okay.
and miles. That's what I'm guesstimating.
Emerging from the vortex, Marcum found himself not in the confines of his Kansas warehouse, but in the middle of a field, disoriented, with the most intense headache imaginable. The immediate aftermath was marked by confusion and a profound sense of dislocation. Marcum had no memory of who he was or how he arrived in that field. In a state of amnesia, he began a slow journey to reclaim his identity and understand the magnitude of his experiment's success. His path eventually led him to Fairfield, Ohio, a staggering 800 miles east from his starting point in Overland Park, Kansas. Bereft of identification, money, or any personal belongings, Marcum sought refuge in a homeless shelter, a stark contrast to the ambitious inventor who had sought to unravel the mysteries of time travel. It was there, within the pages of a newspaper, that Marcum faced the irrefutable evidence of his journey through time. He had arrived 2 years into the future from the date of his experiment.
Ah, I was right. Yeah,
2 years later,
yeah.
and over 800 miles away.
I'm curious if he used more power that time or if it somehow tapped into the potential energy in a human that pushed him so much further. Like, that's interesting.
I did not see or remember hearing that info. Now here's one thing that I will say. I may have been wrong on a part earlier. I said everything was landing on a north-south.
Right.
Maybe it's east-west.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the two.
Right.
It's based on poles. And he landed 800 miles east of his starting location. So he went from Overland Park, Kansas,
Mm-hmm.
which is where the warehouse was,
Right.
to a field outside of Fairfield, Ohio. So he wakes up in this field. He has no clue who he is. He has no clue how he got there. Now you have to remember, this guy's smart.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, in the late 90s, he knew he couldn't take a credit card through there.
Right.
It's electric magnetism.
Yeah.
It would have destroyed it.
Yeah. I was wondering if that hadn't
You can't
somehow destroyed the tape nearby too.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I doubt it because he was using camcorders for other things.
Right. Right.
So I would assume he would have figured that out. Not only that, but this guy's smart.
Yeah.
So he would have
done
had it just far
tests,
enough away,
I'm
probably.
sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
So amnesia, killer headache, no clue where he's at, who he is. He has nothing, not even driver's license. He can't take any of that stuff through the portal.
Right.
Like metal, prime example. He said when he was sending metal through, some metal would go right through, like screws and bolts.
Right.
If it was a big piece of metal, it would explode.
Oh, yeah. No,
And then
don't want to
shoot back
risk
out.
that.
Yeah, so it would go in, it would almost like explode and come right back out. It
Right.
would not go into the vortex.
Yeah.
So what he determined was some metals is not going to go through. So think about it. He probably stripped every piece of metal off of himself.
Yeah. Take his fillings out and
Anything that was metal. And then he's like, I'm going to go through with just the bare necessities. I think what he thought is these guinea pigs are fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with them. It's 2 minutes later. Maybe I'm 15 minutes later. I land 300 yards away. Let's just double it up. When he comes to, he has no clue. So he starts walking. He ends up in Fairfield, Ohio, which I know exactly where that is.
Mm-hmm.
And the first place he gets directed to is a homeless shelter. He gets there. And while he's there, he starts trying to figure things out. And he looks at a newspaper and figures out he is 2 years in the future.
Yeah.
How crazy of a story is that?
That is crazy. I mean, how could he expect that? Like I don't think you can tell the difference between a guinea pig that's lost its memory and one that hasn't. So you'd have no clue that was going to happen.
No clue. No clue. And like he said, the animals he was sending through, he just knew they didn't die.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't know if their mind was wiped
deformed.
Right.
Wasn't deformed. They was still moving around as though they were fine. His assumption is.
Yeah.
Like, were they maybe scared and skittish? Well,
probably.
They just went through a vortex. I would assume they would be. There's something wrong with them if it's not.
Yeah, they get scared if someone whistles. I'm sure going through a vortex was like not the highlight of their lives.
Exactly. So they go through the entire process and they try to figure, or he's trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? But this doesn't explain, like he can't remember where he was staying at.
Right.
He can't remember why he's specifically there. Mm-hmm. All this stuff starts coming back to him in time. But right now, he's going to a homeless shelter because he has nothing. He has no clue what he has.
How much time are we talking about here?
2 years. Oh, how long
to recover? Yeah. 16 years?
No, it was a very short time frame.
Okay.
So I guess the next segment kind of goes into where we go from here. Do you want to advance just a little bit further and see kind of where we're going?
Yeah, for sure. I still got so many questions they're getting answered, but then it's just cropping up new ones. So yeah, please.
Of course. That's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
The quiz master.
I give you a little bit and then I take a little bit.
That's right.
That's
right.
This works.
This is like that show Lost, but at the end, hopefully I'll have more than you've taken away.
Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. We'll find out.
We'll see.
Faced with the monumental task of piecing together his life and identity, Marcum took on odd jobs, gathering enough resources to make the journey back to the source of his odyssey, the warehouse in Overland Park. The anticipation of what awaited him was met with a stark reality. The warehouse, once a hive of innovation and the birthplace of his time machine, stood empty. Every piece of equipment, every note, and all documentation that chronicled his groundbreaking experiments had vanished, leaving behind nothing but echoes of his past endeavors. This loss was not merely material, but deeply personal, as it included the list of donors and supporters who had believed in his vision, a vital link to reconstructing the machine and continuing his work. He knew that the camcorder was running when he made his leap, so they would have known what had happened. Someone would have had to be called. Who took everything? The government? The landlord after he disappeared? Those that were helping him with this project? Michael was devastated. Everything he had worked so hard for gone. This is why this call in to Art Bell was so important. Art might hold some of the keys that he needs to get moving again. He had a new plan and wanted to build the machine again.
This guy's persistent. We'll give him that.
He's got a plan, man.
But I'm still having timeline troubles here. Because he finally made it back. It's not 18 years later at this stage. So
at this stage, it's probably 3-4 years in.
Right.
I guess.
Let's say it's 3 or 4 years late stage. And it says like, that's why his call to Art Bell will be so important. Well, we know that doesn't happen for 12 more years after that.
Yeah.
So what's the deal here? What's the dealio?
So he doesn't fill in all the blanks, but based on other things that I've seen, based on other things that he supposedly said, the most important thing to him in the whole world is this time machine.
Oh, clearly.
With the exception of his name, his address, the only things that came right back to him was that time machine.
Right.
Almost like, and this is the best way I can put it. If you're in some type of an accident, you lose some of that long-term memory. The people that you love sometimes will come back first before other key elements in your life.
Yeah.
The love of his life is this time machine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he never talks about in any of this that I know of, and maybe you've heard more. He never even really speaks of family or, you know, after he's gotten out of jail, his friends, or it almost seems like he's pretty isolated, really, just focused on this one thing.
Well, surprisingly enough, in this third interview, some people started bringing up questions like, well, if you disappeared, why would someone not report you as missing?
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads me to this. His exact words was, when I got back, once I was able to remember enough, I went online, because now you got to remember, we're now in the 2000s, probably.
There's some internet going
was
on.
Becoming a thing.
Yeah.
He did a search. He never found where anyone reported him missing.
Right.
Nobody.
Was this guy just the ultimate loner, or like no one was really concerned with him at all? Like, I mean, even the people who were helping him with the project.
Here's the thing that I think about from time to time. Let's say the government allowed him to do all this.
Right, which we talked about earlier. Seems reasonable.
You brought up that theory.
Yep.
Let's say he achieved something. Who's to say the government doesn't come in, MIB, Men in Black, and says to everyone involved, we don't talk about this and we're taking all this.
Yeah. Or the government were all those people.
Which could be too.
That means that everyone who's seeing the progress, everyone who's talking to him, seeing what's going on, is involved with the government. So when he disappears, they take everything. None of them report anything.
Because you're telling me there's a camcorder with all of this.
Right.
And that's never been released anywhere? That seems very odd to me.
Yeah.
Because if you remember in the 2000s, and hopefully this doesn't get us in trouble, there used to be a series called Faces of Death. Do you remember that?
I hate that stuff, but yeah, I do know about it.
That was huge in the 2000s.
Yeah,
you're telling me remember that something like this. There was even television shows where they did alien autopsies. You're telling me
I remember
this
when that was
made
famous.
It on some type of show? Oh, famous 2000s.
Yeah.
But you're telling me this doesn't show up on something. That seems very odd to me.
Yeah. There's something unusual there.
Something very, very unusual.
Yeah, I think that all that stuff, they packed it up. I think everyone involved in that new thing, like the law enforcement to get him out of the town and into an isolated area, the people who lent him the warehouse and didn't need at any particular time as long as he was showing progress. The people just happened to give him $4, $5, $6, $20,000. I keep forgetting the name of these things. Transformers. People giving him funding. That'd be so easy for a government to set up. And then as soon as he gets success, they've got everything. They understand how it all works because they've been monitoring him doing it the whole time.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that all falls into place there pretty nicely.
I think there's something to it all.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Too suspicious.
He says that eventually some of the rest of his things come to his mind and he goes, shoot, Art Bell may have some of this information. I think Art Bell was the only one that maybe was not in.
Oh, no, I don't think he was involved
with
in
the rest of stuff. No, he wasn't. He was the guy that I think brought a lot of this to the forefront, which is why all these government, because it's a huge syndicate show. Again, millions of people listened the night that first interview occurred. You're telling me no one in the government heard that?
Right. I don't know if you guys have this here. And, you know, we get technology way after the government and militaries get it, right?
Oh, for sure.
Well, we've got technology here where the power company can itemize what's using power in your house from the power that's being used. Like they can say, yeah, they can say this much went to heating. This was your stove. This was your fridge, all this kind of stuff. How it's done, I don't know. But what if they had that technology back then and the power companies saw this huge draw and the government saw that and they're like, this is a device that we've never seen before and it takes massive amounts of power. And that's when their involvement stepped in.
Very well could be. Because again, if you think about it, the Philadelphia Project, what you talked about,
right?
What's it called again?
The Montauk Project or Camp Hero.
Montauk Project. Yeah. All of these used a lot of the same key elements.
They really did.
And so it's all pseudoscience. Mm-hmm. But if all of those projects are true, the government's aware kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to see what's happening on this level also.
Right. And they're taking the technology and putting it into other projects.
Correct.
See, they were only interested in letting this guy have free range until he proved his point.
Correct.
Plus, they probably also thought that he was gone. So
it's kind of like if you think back, and I'm going to screw up some things for some people.
Mm-hmm.
You look back at the X-Files.
Right.
The smoking man.
Mm-hmm.
Good guy, bad guy.
Well, I think he was presented as a bad guy, but I think he was doing his best to make things run the way that he thought they should be run.
But it's funny, right? You got an outsider that's controlling certain things, and we don't necessarily know where on the line they fall.
Right.
Same thing in this story.
Mm-hmm.
We have a situation that's occurring. There's clearly a story there. We don't know where on the fence all of these people are sitting that's playing within the narrative of the story we're telling.
I'm suspicious of just about everyone we've talked about now.
Yes.
Except our beloved Art Bell.
Art Bell has never done anything wrong. That man was a saint. But it's very interesting. He calls back in Art Bell and he's trying to piece everything back together. That's his goal.
Yeah.
Everything that he can't piece together, and Art Bell asked him, he said, if we was to start this again, how far along do you think you are in remembering everything you've done? Because at this point, it's a completely different time, or a completely different machine than what he created at 18 inches tall.
Right.
And he said, I had millions of dollars invested into this thing in this warehouse. So again, you're telling me these people is investing millions of dollars
out of curiosity. I didn't realize it was that much. That's too suspicious.
And we're talking in the 90s.
Yeah.
In the 90s.
Like you can't get that kind. The only thing I can think of that many people have donated to in that amount of money, where there's probably never going to be a return, is the funding for Star Citizen.
Yeah, for sure.
Like that's the only other thing that I've ever seen people do
talk
that.
About misappropriation of funds. Yeah. Good night. I've never been so mad about, for anyone that doesn't know, that is a space simulation game that they have been working on for, I'm a backer on it.
Oh, you're a backer on it.
I'm a backer. I can go straight to the beta right now.
Hold on. Let me see how much people have pledged to Star Citizen. It's an obscene amount.
It's obscene.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. I was a backer since 2018, if that's in any.
Wow.
I think it was 2018 or 2019.
Well, the idea is really cool.
Yeah.
And
the game is cool. It wasn't cool when I backed it.
No, it wasn't even playable then, I don't think.
No. What's the number up to?
They're still getting funding. I don't know if you know this or not.
For sure.
They haven't stopped. Just last year, $104 million. They've raised $500 million, $644 million in free money, basically.
Yeah.
Like you get nothing much in return for that.
I got 2 space shuttles.
Right.
Or 2 spaceships when I backed it in whatever it was, 2018, 2019.
Which is essentially ones and zeros. And I bet you couldn't even sell them for real money. But this guy was getting funding not quite to that level, but in amounts that, like, there was never going to be a return for these people.
No.
So
now there would be, let's say he created what he thought, which was a time machine or a portal system.
Right.
They now own a portion of that. So to a degree, it'd be like an investment. But
did they have an agreement on that, or was it just like implied?
Nothing that I saw indicated any of that. The way it was explained based on the interviews that I listened to and the things that I read was people was coming to him and being like, hey, I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z.
Right. That's all planned, I think.
I mean,
that's where I'm landing on this. Excuse me.
With the funding that he got, that could have came from multiple sources, but the bulk of it, we're talking, that's a lot of dough in the 90s.
Right. It probably
I have a hard time believing.
Looked like it came from multiple sources. But
I'm sure it did.
Let me tell you a little experiment I did on the weekend. Do you ever get those emails from scammers who are like,
the princes are never real?
Yeah.
The princes are never real.
But the way they're doing it now is they're like, here's my cryptocurrency wallet ID. Okay. So there's one I got 3 or 4 times in the junk mail of my Hotmail account. And it's like, we recorded you at naughty sites and blah, blah, blah. Send $900 to this Bitcoin address. Well, Bitcoin addresses, you can't tell who owns them. But what you can do is you can get a list of all their transactions. And what these people do is they use that wallet. They get the money to that. They move it to another wallet, to another wallet, to another wallet, just to make it even more difficult to trace. And they're making, like, it seems like it's all coming from different places, but it's really all coming from one. And they're scamming like millions of dollars. But this also works in reverse. It could look like funding was coming from 10, 15 individuals, really all from the same source.
Oh, for sure. I think it was just maybe last week. I was talking to someone about ransomwares and stuff like that. And they didn't understand what a ransomware was. And I'm like, you have to understand, there are companies, ransomware pirates, that they get into a company. They figure out, oh yeah, I remember who I was talking to now. They figure out everything about the company, and then they say, you're going to pay us X amount of dollars, or we're going to release this to your competition. Now, some companies will just pony up. They'll just pay it. A lot of people will go to specialists who will negotiate for a lesser amount.
Right.
And then there's some companies that go, screw it, put it out. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to pay.
Yeah,
this.
We've kind of seen the result of that a few times, I think.
But the problem is there's enough companies that will pay it because they don't want their information out because, and like I explained to this person because they said, well, there's no way they could have the banking information. I said, if they gave a dollar amount of this is how much it's worth, that's 1 year's worth of that company's equity. That's the number they start at.
Right. My only thing with that is if you pay them, there's no guarantee that they won't release it anyway or come back for more. That's what I'd be afraid of. And I've read a lot on this because I find it so fascinating. They call it the pirates of the internet. And they said that the big companies, because there's big companies that do it, they'll always give it back to you once you pay your ransom. Because what they do is you have all your files, but you need that encryption key to get inside the file. Right.
But they don't guarantee they won't come back in. Now, most of the time, they won't even attempt for 30 days. But if you don't get your stuff figured out, they'll come back in and do it again.
Right.
And then you got to pay them again.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you get the decryption key, and then you have time to patch your holes and that kind of thing. And maybe even they sell you the exploit so you'll know what to look for or something. But that happens to individuals too.
Sure.
Like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's not cool.
No. It's fascinating though,
it is.
That kind of thing actually happens out there.
Do you remember that show Mr. Robot? Starring Rami Malek? It was basically all about that, where they were trying to encrypt the world's largest creditor company so that everyone's debt would go to zero. You should watch it. It's real good.
Oh, wow.
All about this stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But I guess long story short is I believe all of this came from the government, and then they took it all when he was done.
Very well could be. I've got one more segment left that kind of puts a little bow on everything. And then we're going to talk a little bit after that.
Okay.
About some things that I found when I was researching this entire case. Do you want to hear the wrap it up in a bow thing, and then we'll talk about the rest?
Yeah. Let's hear the bow.
Listeners from across the globe, inspired by Marcum's tenacity and vision, rallied to his cause. Suggestions for funding and collaboration poured in, including the innovative idea of setting up a GoFundMe account, a testament to the collective desire to see Marcum succeed. Art Bell, recognizing the potential impact of Marcum's work beyond the realms of radio and science, proposed pursuing a book deal. Marcum, humble in his admission of not being a writer, was open to the idea of partnering with a ghostwriter to ensure the technical intricacies of his work were accurately conveyed. Among the myriad of suggestions was a partnership with the government, an avenue that could provide Marcum with the resources and platform necessary to elevate his research to new heights. Encouraged by Art Bell and his audience, Marcum was buoyed by the prospect of continuing his experiments, each option presenting a pathway to further his groundbreaking work. After that last interview with Art Bell, people from around the world followed Michael online, kept up with his ideas and visions. He really only had one major challenge, going through the vortex with essential items. Metal objects, unpredictable in their behavior when subjected to the forces within the vortex, posed a particular dilemma. Through meticulous trial and error, Marcum discovered that a metal tube, crafted in a specific manner, could function as a Faraday cage. This breakthrough meant that the tube and anything within it could pass through the portal undamaged, providing a solution to transporting materials, including metal, safely through the vortex. Those that followed Michael were excited. This was the missing part of the puzzle needed to have all the proof that time travel was able to be achieved. Marcum was ready to embark on yet another journey through the vortex. This time, he planned to enter the portal within the protective embrace of the metal tube, taking with him a cell phone loaded with notes, photographs, and even money. Everything he would need to orient himself upon arrival, should his memory falter. It is said that this is the last note that was left behind from Michael Marcum. Or was it?
And we never heard of him again, I assume.
That is what they say. So, just to recap everything, 18 years later, he does another Art Bell. In the process of doing that, people are now super interested in what's going on. They're like, that's crazy.
Right.
But I want to be a part of it again. If you did it now twice, the last series of people seen it, clearly you know what you're doing. You got something going on. People need to be able to do whatever it is that you're doing.
Right.
So even Art Bell gets involved. He's like, listen, let's do this. Let's do the GoFundMe. And on the phone line in 2.5 hours, you hear all the people like, listen, you set up a GoFundMe, and a couple people talk about crowdfunding. You put your notes out. Let us see what's going on. That way we feel like we're investing, but we can see what's happening. Through all this money, he starts creating this entire process again.
Right.
The biggest dilemma he had, like he said, was how do I go through this portal and not be in the same mess I was last time?
So he comes up with the tube.
Figures out the tube, the Faraday. He's like, that's how I do it. So all these people's watching everything and now they're funding it. So all his notes are out there. They're seeing every single thing that's going on for him. They know it exists. They know what's happening. And then one day, nothing.
How long ago
disappears
was
off the
that?
face of the earth again. Well, let's think about it. First interview was 95. He had the next one in 96.
Right.
From 96, 18 years after that. So 96, 06, 16, 15, 14. So 2014 would have been the last time. It would have been from 2014 to now, 10 years roughly.
So we're due to see him again in 8 more years.
Now here's the thing. Like last time, he didn't tell anyone he was going in.
Right.
Because again,
didn't want to be stopped.
If his story's true, they definitely would stop him now. They'd be like, listen, we already know you're crazy. We're not sending you through a second time. But again, what happened to Michael Marcum?
Right. So I find it hard to believe he does this again and he doesn't set up video the second time. Like, could this really be covered up a second time?
I don't know.
Like,
could it?
I don't know. Like, did he skip with all the money? Did he have a working prototype this time around that people saw? Like,
it's limited to what you get on the internet. Now, here's the thing. The internet, it's not always true.
Unreliable narrator, the internet is.
It's an unreliable narrator. It's typically the internet is based off of the information that people provided. And then you have to question, why are they providing this information?
Well, one thing that, if this is true, we do know about this is that over time, regardless of how much power is put into it, how far it sends someone or something is unpredictable by what he or we knew. So if he hops in this tube and gets in it, instead of 2 years, it could be, could be 1,000 years, could be 1,000,000 years.
Could be.
Like, who knows? And how would you know?
Could be.
If there's no video and no one saw him go into it. Like, we don't even know.
The only person that can answer that is Michael Marcum.
And his guinea pigs.
Yes.
Yeah, man, I don't know. Well, I do have one question going backwards. Let's go backwards a little bit.
Sure.
4 years, he has his memory all back and everything. Why does it take him 16 years to contact? 14. Yeah, 14 years to contact Art Bell again. Did he ever explain that?
He circled around some of the things. He said his memory still was not 100%.
Right.
There was lapsing. But again, a lot of times, like one of the questions that came up is, why wouldn't you go to the person that owned the property?
Right. Well, I was thinking that also.
Like, that doesn't make sense. They said, we live in a day and age where we live in public record. Why wouldn't you go to the courthouse, find out who owns the warehouse, and then go to them and say, where's my stuff?
Man, he could probably hang out there and someone will show up eventually.
Probably.
Like,
his answer was, I don't know. I didn't really think of that. Now, that being said, think about all the people that's extremely intelligent, that we know is extremely intelligent. Generally extremely smart.
But not practical.
But not not necessarily practical.
Right. It's like that story I told you about that really smart, educated guy I know that we had that old sweetheart stove, you know, the ones that has fire burning on one side and then that. And he's like, where do you want me to throw this paper? And we said, oh, throw it into the stove. And what does he do? Super intelligent guy, had like 7 years of post-secondary education. He opens the oven part of the stove and throws the paper in. And I was like, what? And he's like, you said to throw it in the stove. And I'm like, yeah, the part with fire in it. Like, are you baking this paper? Like, super intelligent guy, incredibly educated, no practical knowledge.
Right.
Like, maybe he's the same, I guess.
But if you enjoyed this podcast, wherever you're listening to your podcast, please be sure to rate us. We definitely appreciate that. That's how we continue to grow. I feel like there's a lot of you that's really helped us here lately. I'm loving the new comments. I'm loving all the people that's corresponding back and forth with us. It's definitely appreciated. Also, if you're on the YouTube machine, please be sure to give us that thumbs up. Also, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, definitely check that out. I've also tried to be a little bit more active in posting our shorts to other content creation spots. So Instagram, Facebook, Reddit. I've kind of been piecing this all over the place. I'm trying to get our numbers up a little bit. So definitely, wherever you listen to our stuff, just give it a like. Definitely appreciate that for sure.
Yeah. We live off this.
Above and beyond that, hopefully y'all enjoyed this story. I enjoyed telling it. I think this is a fascinating story. I know I sprung some of this on everyone at the end, but I didn't want to divulge all my cards until the very end.
Oh, man. I'd say the first part was awesome, but through the second part, you ripped me in so many directions. I just didn't know what to believe. Amazing.
Like that vortex.
I was in a vortex. I feel it.
Well, hopefully y'all enjoyed it. Until we see y'all on the next podcast. Goodbye.
Bye from the vortex.